People don't exactly line up for the newest version of Google devices as opposed to the Apple iPhone.
Well, to be sure, these devices are not made by Google, so that's part of it. The software isn't, that's the important thing. But these are Huawei phones, these are LG phones. And
it's hard to build a cult following that way, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different business model, and so maybe the marketing model is not going to quite match it as well. You know, the notion of Android fundamentally is to propagate a software system that sends users back to Google for other services that Google gets paid for. Now, that, of course, is the subject of an FTC investigation, Justice Department investigation right now, over the ways that Google might be using Android to gain an unfair advantage over other companies trying to write software for smartphones. A big issue for Google, one they surely did not discuss in today's press event.
How's your new Nexus phone?
I don't, Pam, have a
That's exactly my point.
You don't have a new Nexus phone?
No one has a new. Who has a new Nexus phone? I mean, they think that this is. I'm sure, but did they sell 13 million over a weekend? Isn't that how many Apple managed to sell of its new iPhone 6?
Apple. So it's interesting that the economies of scale that work for Apple developing a single device, or actually two devices, right? The 6S and the 6S Plus in the latest model. They're able to achieve hardware economies of scale, let alone the software, right? Let's assume the software development costs are equal at both Google and Apple. We don't really know, and we'll never know because they're not breaking those numbers out. But if we assume the software costs the same to develop, and the feature sets might be the same, the hardware advantages that Apple can get on economies of scale, making their own chips, using chips from companies like Skyworks or Avago or others, is sizable, and it lets them have a product that's very hard to compete with Google. Although there are more Android phones sold, to be sure, than Google phones, but there's more than Apple phones. But there's more profit in Apple phones than there are in the phones of the Android.
That's kind of important, isn't it? Yeah.
Profits.
Make more money. Yeah, that's not a bad thing.
Not these days.
Does Google need to make money?
Have you heard of Amazon? Have you heard of Salesforce?
Wait, that's a different story. We'll go there later.
Does Google need to make money on its phones on Android to accomplish what it wants to do, which is bring more people into the ecosystem?
So the world has changed from a world where computing is happening on these things, right? And it still is, to be sure. Everyone that ever wrote a headline that says the PC is dead wrote it on a PC. But as more and more computing is happening in a mobile environment, you know, Google very cleverly saw this coming from a long ways off and realized if they wanted their dominant company on the desktop to port to the new computing environment, they had to be central to the operating systems of this new environment. The problem is, when you do a search on OpenTable, probably your favorite app.
Well, anyway, go ahead. Whatever.
Your kids' hockey games.
Right.
You probably don't. You probably use the Snap. You're a big Snapchat person.
Oh.
You don't go to Google to search for Snapchat. You don't go on your phone and search for Google for OpenTable. You go right to the app. That's a problem for Google because people don't begin their searches at Google.com. With apps, it's a different world out there.